Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealey. It is Friday, December the 13th. Oh my gosh, it's Friday the 13th. Everybody, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let me see where my trusty co-host is this morning. Let's see where David is.
Hi.
There he is, the man of the hour. Hey, David.
Hi, Tamara. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Okay.
It's all gloomy today, David. It's Friday the 13th, but 13 is a good number biblically. You had the 12 disciples and Jesus. So 13 is a good number.
That's a nice way of counting.
Hey, that's the way I have to look at the
Uh-huh.
13th. Anybody that tries to make it a bad thing. So today, David, we're going to talk to, are you tapping on that table? I see that camera shaking.
I confess that I'm
You're
not
doing.
tapping, I'm bouncing.
You're bouncing. Oh no. Okay, well here's Ken. He's with us this morning, Mr. Ken Williams. Let's see where he is. Hey, good morning, Ken.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How are you today?
All right.
Good, good. Welcome back to the broadcast. For those of you that don't know Mr. Ken Williams, I'm going to let him introduce himself. And he's always talking about policing right here in America. So, Mr. Ken Williams, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Ken Williams. I'm a consultant that deals with wrongful death, many cases around the country involving wrongful death, use of force, police practices. I testify as an expert witness and I review cases. I'm hired by attorneys to review cases with respect to those type of unfortunate incidences. Thank you for having me on the broadcast today. Of course, there's been a lot happening in the America with respect to policing that I think is important for us to keep track of. I'm not sure if that interference is on my side.
No,
But
we hear you fine.
oh, okay, perfect. But I mean the unfortunate part that is happening that I think that we need to be very aware of is the fact that there are a lot of people out here that are expressing their First Amendment speech in policing, on the job as well as off the job. And recently, a few months ago, news reports had exposed several hundred police officers from different agencies around the country that were using their speech, whether they were on the job or off the job. It was racist speech. It was, disparaging words that were being said about different groups. And I think that's something that we should talk about because, unfortunately, we have a very divided country right now. And, the way that many fights begin with what people say and how they say things. And I think that's a good topic for us to begin with today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would mention also that connected to that is an executive order that Trump just passed about equating anti-Semitism with anti-Israeli criticism, and so I think they're really that the contradictions around free speech are really at issue, particularly at a time when the president has has engaged in abusive uses of speech over and over again. And so I think you're right, Ken. I think this is a really important issue. And how does it how does it affect someone's right of free speech when they are a law enforcement officer, right? Um, and these remarks, hurtful words, could actually and probably frequently do translate into their practice on the job, right?
I
So,
agree.
are they to be held to a higher standard? And is that standard going to be the one that's going to be higher than the one used by the President of the United States? There really seems to me to be, I think, a big issue there. So,
Bring it back in layman's terms, because David will take us like on the next level. But I want you to bring it down, Ken, because
Sure.
policing in America is, when we talk about that, it strikes people in urban communities and in a different way. So bring us back down to a level where we can all kind of engage. I don't want us to get too.
Sure. I think we first have to start off with what is the First Amendment. The First Amendment allows us to, engage in speech that's protected, whether it is that we're protesting or we're complaining about something, or we're just talking in general about different topics that we want to speak about. We have a country that affords us protections, with the exception of your First Amendment speech can't threaten someone. There are exceptions to the First Amendment that will prohibit you from doing certain things. In policing, because we have many citizens that will engage police officers will engage members of the community, and every citizen should have a right to be able to, if they feel that they were wrongfully stopped, let's say in a traffic encounter, they should be able to say, hey, why are you harassing me? Or why am I being stopped? Or, words to that effect. And it shouldn't, the law also says, based on policy in policing, as well as, police officers don't have a First Amendment right, if that makes any sense. You can complain to a police officer about the course of the action that's being brought against you, as long as you're not threatening them. And it shouldn't breach the peace of the police officer, meaning it shouldn't disturb them, because that's a part of their job.
But
So
it does disturb them when you ask them, so why are you stopping me? I don't know. So what is that? It does disturb them. Why are you, why are you following me? Like, it does disturb them.
Of course, and that's the reason why once it starts becoming confrontational, based on you expressing your First Amendment right as the person who's stopped by the police, and then the police officer starts to engage that individual in a hostile manner simply for asking these questions. Now we're encroaching on what's called contempt of cop. Contempt of cop is where you shouldn't be able to breach the peace of that police officer, but the police officer all of a sudden starts to go and engage you in a hostile manner, as if you don't have the right to question why you were stopped or questioned or frisked. And contempt of cop is one of those things that, if we think about many things that become an excessive force claim, they don't start off with everyone having pleasant, discussions between themselves or with the other person. It starts off with, their First Amendment speech, an argument that ensues that becomes now maybe a physical confrontation later on, that becomes an excessive force claim because of the contempt of cop. So, when we have officers that are engaged in insightful, discriminatory, racist, bigotry online during duty hours or off duty hours, we have to question whether or not that person is really fit for that profession. I mean, and it's because officers are held to a higher standard. They have a duty to protect and serve citizens, but at the same time, they have policies that dictate what they can and cannot do. And many policies in policing have policies related to candor, whether or not how you engage citizens. You have to be, respectful all the time. You shouldn't be cursing at people and, engaging them in such a way that you're kind of like creating your own exigency or coercing someone to do something that may have them get arrested. You shouldn't be doing that as a police officer. So I think it's important for us to go and think about what that First Amendment means. It doesn't mean that police officers have a right as the same citizens that they're policing, because think about this. If you want to have a First Amendment right and express yourself like everybody else, then maybe you're not fit for the job. Maybe you should go out and get a different job if that's what you want to do.
Well, I thought that Cheryl just put up a note that talked about recognizing the power differential, and I think that's really insightful, and I think she's also right to say that people who have those attitudes do not belong on a police force. How you screen for that is, really an interesting, actually free speech issue. But I wanted to connect this also with what Attorney General Robert Bill Barr said. William Barr got up and made a speech about 10 days ago or a week ago, saying that if people are not respectful to the police, maybe they shouldn't be given police protection. That is really a very, very dangerous position to take, as rightly people have pointed out. That's not the role of taking my leg again.
Yeah, and you know what, David? I'm gonna add on to that. There's communities of color and people in urban areas that wouldn't mind policing themselves. They know their neighborhood, they know their neighbors, they know what's going on. So I don't think there would be a whole lot of pushback in some areas if they were able to start policing themselves. And Ken, you can chime in on that, because I'm sure you've seen that or heard that.
Never, but that's really an issue of power of the state over the rest of us, and I do think that's really we should not only abolish the prisons, we should abolish police forces, because they don't really represent, they protect they protect property. That's what they're primarily set up to do, and to control direct action by people in trying to get their demands met, which is also pretty.
Let me respond this way, and I'm going to do it in reverse order, because David raised a very important issue. When I said protect and serve earlier, David is actually absolutely correct. I mean, when you look at court case, SCOTUS court case rulings, in order for a police officer actually to have a duty to protect you, you have to be in their custody. If you're not in their custody, there is no duty to protect you as a citizen. So that means, you would think that a police officer should have a duty to protect you. You call 911, you're a domestic violence victim, and you go out and you get a restraining order, and you would think that the police officers would have a duty to serve that restraining order as immediately as possible. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they can't. And let's say, for instance, in that scenario, the person is assaulted by their boyfriend or girlfriend, in the meantime, and that person wants to bring a case against the police. The case would be defeated simply because actually the police have no duty to really protect you. And at the same time, I think we need to look at the fact that in terms of communities being able to police themselves, a cop is a citizen on patrol. It's just that all the taxpayers in that community contribute to the patrol. So this idea of majority communities of color policing themselves is a fascinating idea. However, it's almost like double taxing yourself. You would be paying taxes to have a police force that polices other people, but you would pay individuals to police you as well. That would be a double tax imposed on yourself, which makes no sense to me.
So what about paying those people in the community to do it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, at the end of the day, policing is about having uniformity, meaning you have some people that are trained the same. You have some people that have to abide by the same policies. And if the policies are good, you can hold people accountable. As a citizen, the third caveat is that if you as a citizen were to police your own community, you can't indemnify yourself. The police officers are indemnified by their state, or by their badge, or by their duty to protect all citizens. And what that means is that, let's say, for instance, you as a citizen want to go and arrest an individual, and you do take the steps to arrest that individual for a crime that you suspect that they were involved in. If it turns out that that was a false arrest, you're going to be held accountable as an individual. And Whereas the police officer, if they suspected there was a crime and later on it turned out that there was no crime involved, but they may have, had good faith in arresting that person, they're going to be indemnified. There's a legal liability, a civil liability to an individual, a citizen who is not an officer taking steps to act as an officer.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, David.
Sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I really think, Ken, that you're raising some very deep, issues here.
I try, David. I try.
No, I mean, it seems to me that these are gnarly questions. They're not easily resolved because the way that police departments function is that I don't know how to say this, exactly, whether it's police departments or individual police officers, you cannot question their authority, and the power differential, is that they are armed, but not only that they're armed, it's that exactly what you said, which is that they have a protected status, to act in these, they are authorized to act in these situations. And one of the things I think that is particularly a problem with the way policing is done right now is that it's based on a military model, right? And so you do not have the default position of de-escalation, right? That's what a lot of even internal criticisms of the police have been talking about, is that police officers are not taught de-escalation, right? That as a kind of maybe even the central feature of their training, right? And
why are they not taught? Let's stop there, because I'm like, why are they not taught that? Because I go back and I look at how they shoot to kill. For the most part, when they shoot, they shoot to kill. I mean, why? You could shoot someone in their leg, you could shoot them in their arm, like you could shoot, but why do you shoot to kill?
Okay, so let's break that down, because there are some things that we need to clarify. Police are trained to shoot to stop, and that means that sometimes, unfortunately, when they shoot and they do stop the individual, the person is killed. They succumb to an injury. So the training does focus on shooting to stop that person if they pose an immediate threat, either to the officer or to citizens that might be at large. And the thing about it is that police are trained to shoot a center mass, and that sometimes means that the center mass can change. It can be a leg, it could be an arm, it could be a head, it could be a chest. Individuals move. Most people aren't static. If it's a dynamic situation that involves the use of an officer using a firearm, there's usually moving going on. It's not at a range where everything is static and you don't have to worry about that dynamic part of it. At the same time, I think it's important for us to think about, what the power is of the people who are being stopped based on a command and control environment. Policing is about command and control. And the control part means that at some point in time, if they have a legal authority, a reasonable suspicion, a legal authority to arrest, they're going to control that individual. So what I like to try to tell people is that at the end of the day, if you understand that their duty is going to be to control you, you're not going to be able to argue without a judge and a jury present right there to go and figure out whether or not you're guilty or innocent. That's another stage that happens outside of that stop. It's a lot easier to vocalize your concerns, but also understand that policing is about, if their perception is that they are being threatened or there's a potential for a threat, that causes, based on their training, a reaction. And the reaction is going to be to escalate in force to control the individual. And sometimes they can de-escalate in force. So this idea that they don't de-escalate is not true also, because there's a continuum that police work within. It can be a verbal. It can always go all the way up to displaying a firearm and showing deadly force and not using deadly force, all the way back down to, once the person is compliant, they back down to, of some physical contact to put handcuffs on a person and the person's put into a police cruiser. We've seen that a lot, right? We've seen where police officers on cops programs will have a gun out and they'll say stop and all this and that. They're giving all these orders and then they de-escalate and the person is arrested and put in back of a car. So there is escalation and de-escalation. I think that's important for us to go and note, even though we may not agree with how it all transpires.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ken, I hear what you're saying about that, and that does clarify what's going on the street to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. But it seems to me that the question is what is the context of escalation and de-escalation, right? And where is the I guess I don't know whether I want to call it predisposition, or something like that. If the predisposition is to control someone, right, a civilian, a citizen, right, that's going to lead to certain kinds of behavior and actions on the part of the police, right? If the predisposition is to I don't know what to call it exactly, but to understand maybe is the best way to describe that. If the predisposition is to understand what is maybe agitating the person, or it's going to lead to a different process, a different interaction, seems to me. So and will predispose the police officer to de-escalate, right? And that, I think, is really where, I think this is a really important conversation because it really does directly relate to how people deal with police in the streets, right? Or how the police deal with people in the streets. And if there is an affinity or a set of common experiences, it's much more likely that the police officer is going to understand what the context is, right? And be more predisposed, it seems to me, to de-escalate rather than seek out, this is a controlled situation.
But let's break that down for a second. Okay. It's important for us to realize that in order for the police officer to have the authority to control an individual, typically they involve crimes. Police officers aren't going to go to someone's apartment because the landlord calls because the person who's a tenant doesn't want to pay the rent. That's not a crime. You know what I mean? That's a civil matter. Go to court and have that straightened out with a judge. So the police officers may arrive and they're going to say, hey, not my authority, outside my realm of what I do. See you later, but go to court. But if there's a crime, if there's reasonable suspicion of a crime, is basically the lowest threshold. It's not a hunch of a crime. It's supposed to be reasonable suspicion of a crime that is about to take place, has taken place, or will take place in the future. The police officers have certain tools that afford them the right to be able to stop that individual to assess what that particular person is doing. Now, that becomes the gray area that many people, especially people who look like me, who are Black, who have been subjected to stop, question, and frisk based on very racially biased policing methods to go and control individuals. And when I say control individuals, some of that is because in the background, there are databases that these people who did not commit a crime, their names are entered into a database that police hold on to that data forever. And they may not have even been arrested, but their name appears in that database. So that's another problem that we should discuss for another day. At the same time, when in terms of this warrior cop versus community policing cop, the warrior cop and the community policing cop are one and the same, because you can have on an 8-hour shift, the community policing cop is in let's say a white neighborhood, majority white neighborhood, and everyone around there is seeing officer friendly. And then all of a sudden that same officer maybe because of a bias that they have, is sent to a call in on a black street with black complainants calling about something going on, and then all of a sudden this community policing cop who is officer friendly all of a sudden becomes warrior cop and comes out with guns blazing and doing all types of crazy stuff. So those are serious conversations that we should have, as far as why is it that certain people in policing police people differently based on the color of their skin, their national origin, their gender, all types of biases that people have that ultimately harm other people. That, if we think about the opiate crisis, we have white people. It's like 90% of the opiate crisis is consumed by white people who became afflicted by a mental health disease from taking a prescription drug, basically, right? That they now abuse. But we don't have police officers going out and arresting white people the same as black people who were unfortunately found to be harmed mentally by crack cocaine. We have a whole attitude that is like, why don't we have drug courts and not have people go to jail? Whereas many years ago, we had people being locked up continuously for having crack cocaine. So we have biases in our society, and we have to have these very serious talks about how the outcomes are, and when those outcomes are selective in enforcement, how we're harming people, and we're also showing our biases and our racism. And that's something that I think, in the courts, in the police agencies, these biases exist throughout the entire spectrum of every place in America, because that's how, America began. It began with these, very, very racially divided attitudes, and those attitudes persist today. And that's an honest discussion that we should always have, because talking about racism and the negative impact it has on people should never be an easy discussion. It's always going to be very brutal and honest if you're talking to me, a black guy, about it.
That's why we appreciate you so much, Mr. Ken Williams. Tell us your website. Let everybody know how they can find you, and tell us a little bit more about what you do so they can understand like how you can help.
Certainly. Again, my name is Ken Williams. My website is KWill Services, KWILL Services.com. And I get hired by municipalities, people who have, felt that they were wronged. Sometimes it's a municipality where they're representing the interests of the people, or they could be representing the interests of a police officer. And as an unbiased individual, I review cases regarding use of force, and I make a determination on whether or not someone is responsible or not, and they decide whether or not they want to have me testify in a trial or at an administrative hearing regarding, those type of cases. They're very difficult cases, and at the same time, I believe my work is very important, because on the police side, there are many, many people who will support police officers, give them a benefit of doubt. And I think it's important as a former law enforcement officer that we recognize the fact that there are many, many mistakes that are made in policing. Some of them are mistakes of the mind, some of them are mistakes of the heart. And at the end of the day, when policing makes a mistake, usually someone's going to be harmed, and it's going to be a very negative impact on the community. And we got to have it where we treat this thing fairly, instead of having it so lopsided, where police unions will, put forth incredible defenses for some of the most egregious acts, and citizens who are harmed, like, let's say, for instance, Laquan McDonald, he was a citizen harmed. It takes years for there to be justice, in the system, to go and show fair and equitable outcomes, where police officers held responsible. Maybe some officers got fired in that case for covering things up. But ultimately, we have to have expert witnesses come in and talk about what the truth is without it being a biased situation. And that's where I come in.
You can find Mr. Ken Williams at kwillservices.com. Thank you, Mr. Ken. He's always with us to give us a bigger perspective on policing in America. So I appreciate you. We look forward to having you back soon. I know you're getting ready to travel abroad with your work. So we look forward, safe travels, and we look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, Dave. We have one other quick guest in the lobby. We're going to bring him in. There is a movie that it's coming out. Let me bring him in. Justice on Trial. Mr. Chad Lawson Cooper, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm great. And you?
Good. And I asked you to have that camera still. Mr. Chad Lawson Cooper is the executive director and writer of Justice on Trial. It's a play and it's a movie. It is being shown this coming January at the Porter Sanford right here in Decatur, Georgia. Chad, good morning.
That's correct. That's correct. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Yes, Justice on Trial, the movie 2020 Through Their Eyes will be premiering on February the 16th nationwide. And it's a movie that was based on an on-Broadway stage play that we've done in New York for over 2.5 years. So the movie is really the same precipice, same very similar script, but a little bit more serious than the play. It's about two civil rights attorneys suing the U.S. Justice Department for reparations and damages done to African Americans. And therefore, we bring back time traveler witnesses such as Harriet Tubman, Medgar Evers, and Emmett Till to testify as expert witnesses to a mixed jury, Black, white, Hispanic. And then they deliberate the evidence at hand and then also discuss the issue that we all deal with in America, and that's racism. So it's a very intellectual type movie. It's educational, motivational, and inspirational. And I think it's a great time to put it out during Black History Month in February of 2020, so that we're doing something different to raise the consciousness and the just the issue of what we deal with as a people and the need for reparations, because it's something that's owed to Black people.
Oh yeah, we're going to continue to talk about reparations. That is a big part of my candidacy is reparations, and it's a difficult and uncomfortable conversation, but it's one that we will continue to have. I think this movie is timely, David. I think that this is putting this on the big screen and having these conversations and bringing back Harriet and bringing back Medgar and bringing back Emmett. These characters that have a story that some of our young people may not even know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Chad, tell us where the play is and then give us the dates for the movie.
Now, the play is going to be at the Porter Sanford on January the 10th. Porter
That's
Sanford,
in Decatur,
which is located on Rainbow Drive in Decatur.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the last play that we'll do before the movie comes out, February the 16th. And the movie will be released in selected Regal theaters across the country. And we're also doing a mega church tour with the movie. So it'll be in several locations. If it's not in the Regal Theater in your city, it will be in one of the churches in your theater that has the capabilities of showing movies. And so we'll have the community at large in many cities that will be watching that movie on February the 16th as the thing to do for Black history.
Awesome. And we'll have you back, Chad. I want to thank you for bringing us this update on Justice on Trial. Those of us that are local to the Atlanta area, this is a must-see play, a must-see movie. I am going to be helping to get the message out around reparations, and we're going to collaborate with Mr. Chad on with this movie. So be on the lookout for some screenings, some showings. And Mr. Chad, I want to thank you for joining us. I know you didn't have but a few minutes this morning, but we will definitely have you back real soon.
Awesome. I look forward to it. And thank you for the work you're doing, and excited about what you're going to do in the Senate on a national level to implement what we're showing you in entertainment. You are that piece that will implement reparations. And we're excited to have someone like you dedicated to getting the job done. So thank you.
Thank you. We're all in this together. Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
All right, one more person here is in the house. Mr. Egberto Willis.
Buenos dias, ¿cómo está mi familia? Good morning, how is my family?
I hope you speak a little Spanish, David, because I know maybe one or two words of what he said.
David is an honorary Latino, right, David? Right, David? I mean, we know.
Your high school Spanish that I took.
Anyhow, how you guys doing? I wasn't able to check into the show before because I have people out here taking care of fixing a few things around, things in the attic.
Oh, wow. I know. Housework. So tell us, give us a national update. Tell us what's going on nationally.
National update. Well, of course, I won't speak about impeachment but of course I am. The articles went through the Judiciary Committee, and now they are going to be marked up on the floor to be voted on. Rumor has it that a few Democrats are going to be defecting and not supporting the impeachment articles. And as it turns out, so it'll simply give me material for my new website, Failed Democrats. So that's not going to be much of a problem.
So wait, you have a new website that you start, Failed Democrats. Tell me about it, because it damn sure sounds like withhold the vote, on a not so forward though. But go ahead.
Yeah, well, I have a website I've had for a while, but I'm starting to repopulate it now. It's called faileddemocrats.com, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I think the way we get folks in order is to call them out. Light is the best disinfectant. You go ahead, and when these guys misbehave, when they are no longer following the policies that is best for all of us, meaning middle class America, meaning poor America, meaning all different identities in America, I think it's important that we call them out. So we're going to be calling those folks out. But now on the national front, it's sort of an international intersection with the national. Corbyn got his clock cleaned last night in England. And Corbyn they like to equate Corbyn to Bernie Sanders. And there are good reasons for that, because Bernie is what we call sumamente progresivo. He's very progressive, and meaning he supports all these progressive policies. Now, Corbyn has a lot of other issues in England, in the UK, why his old party lost. And it has very little to do with these people running away from progressive values. It's more a social issue. It's more a nationalistic issue. But over here, they're spinning it in the United States of America as the defeat of progressivism, the defeat of populism. And a lot of our own Democrats here unless we get on the ball, are going to fall for that crap and start to say, oh my God, we better tack to the center. We better tack to the center, because look at what happened in England. Look at what happened in the UK. Corbyn lost and the Conservatives won. We cannot allow that narrative to develop. We can't allow that narrative to develop, because it's going to derail everything that you stand for, Tamara, everything that you stand for, David. And we have to make sure and not let what the media is about to do with Corbyn and try to slap Corbyn on both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to become the norm. So we have a lot of work to do. Independent media.
Yes, that was just what I was going to say. Independent media. This is why we are so important, because if we don't have broadcasts like yours, like mine, and a lot of the others that are out there, I'm telling you, they get to write the story. They get to tell, they get to dictate to America what America should think. And we give them an opportunity to see the whole thing and then make a decision based on, the truth, and not just specifics based on an agenda.
Yes, Senator, you're absolutely correct. I noticed that the other guest that you had already named you Senator as well. So I'm not the only one already calling you Senator. So you better go out there and hit Georgia throughout the rural towns, the big cities, the small cities, the big towns, the little towns. We want to be watching Tamara, Johnson, Shealey all over the place.
Yeah, I'm not playing, Egberto. This is our time. This is our time, and the grassroots is we're taking over.
we have to, and again, this thing with Corbyn, I know a lot of people that are listening to your show don't really get into, let's say, UK politics or anything like that. but I really want them to kind of take a look at what happened in UK and not allow our media here to use it as a scare tactic to what you are doing, what David is doing, what we are doing, to try to make sure that the politicians that we elect, like we will elect you, as progressive people who are looking out for middle class America. We have to now, and I hate to put it this way, but the selection that these guys made was sort of a demonization selection, right? If you elect these guys, it is bad for you. It is time for us to stop sitting back and just being so sweet and nice and say, they're trying to kill you. We are not. I'm not using, don't say kill, but
well, they're trying to destroy the planet. That's the,
yes, David.
Underlying, I mean, I think there really is I don't see a way for us to save the planet without addressing the issue of white supremacy. And that really, I think, is the ultimate way in which racial privilege does not benefit whites.
I have a question for you, David.
I mean, and unless we find a way to create a movement that is a solidarity movement, but that's based on equality rather than a white top and a black bottom, that ain't going to work anymore. As Tamara's campaign and everything else that that's been going on in independent African American ADOS politics is indicating. And the idea that we have to choose between the extreme right and the right is, I think, one of the catch-22s that you're pointing out, Egberto.
He had a question. Let him. He had a question for you, David. Go ahead.
No. As a resident white guy here, I need to. No, but legitimate question, because you say something that, I mean, you're an enlightened guy. You know what I mean? But there are a lot of things that you're saying there that sounds great coming out of you. But my question is, how many white people, average white person, is going to be receptive to the message in the manner that you just said it? I know. I mean, you are able to say that because you're happy within your own skin. You know who you are, and you know what the values of America are, and you know that. But a lot of white people take offense to what you just said there. And my question to you is, first of all, you can say that, you can go into a white room and say certain things, and they'll just say, that white dude don't, he may be, something or whatever. I can't go into the room and express it the same way that you can. How do we actually get them to listen before? In my case, they first have to get over all the identities that I have to listen to me. In your case, they just have to get over what you're saying.
Well, Egberto, I think that my view of what's going on out there partly has to do with challenging the stereotypes of working class whites. All right. Mm-hmm. In other words, white people are not a monolith.
Right.
They're more stereotyped than the stereotypes of people of color, Latinx and African American. I mean, ADOS is a living example of that.
No kidding. Don't I know that?
We have to differentiate, right? The other thing, though, is, and I think this is really an important issue, is that people who, and this is why I don't like the word woke, but people who are European Americans who think, and I don't call myself white, I'm a European American. Mm-hmm. I think that white is a term that it should be reserved for people who are engaged in thinking and acting white in defense of ruling class interests. All right. So but among those are people who consider themselves progressive, woke. I was thinking about this whole issue about woke. Woke is not, you turn on a light switch. It's a so it really is. It's a struggle. It's an internal struggle and it's an external struggle. But for many people who are progressives, who are leftists, who are socialists, who are European American, their thinking is getting in the way of them participating in breaking down the stereotypes around working class whites. They can't connect, they can't communicate, and that is their natural place for them to be. That's their natural responsibility.
Yes.
So if we see this as something that's kind of like a two-step, that involves working class whites and progressive European Americans, then we realize that my mentor wrote an essay 40 years ago. What am I saying? 40, 50 years ago.
You're telling your age, David.
Yeah. 1968, he wrote an essay called "Can White Radicals Be Radicalized?" And that is exactly the point that he was making. In fact, the cover had the word "Can white workers be radicalized?" with the workers crossed out and the radicals written in on top. So what he was saying is stop blaming the European American section of the working class for your own flaws and failures, on the left. And the first thing is to really really check out these a set of assumptions that about what inequality means in this country. It does not mean that European American working people are getting benefits from that inequality. All that it means is that it creates a status difference that they assume is that they assume is something they need to defend against, not against the ruling elite, but against other working people who are simply demanding equality. And but the thing is that most working people are really, they're in the back of their minds, they are workers. They understand that they are being exploited. They understand that the country is set up for the rich, and they understand that that solidarity is the best way to go. So,
and that is what we got. That's what we have to fight, and that's, I mean, in my opinion as well. I think that's why guys like you are, I've been telling folks, and some of them laugh at me. There's this in a Democratic meeting one time. This white guy got up and he said, "I want to say something, but the black women are going to get on my case." And I said, "Do you believe in what you're going to say?" "Yes." Is what you're going to say move the movement forward?" "I think it will, but they're going to say, who am I to say it?" I said, "Well, you better get your butt up there and say it, because the same kind of feeling you got about, oh, I don't know how they're going to feel about me, is the same feeling I have when I go into certain spaces and wonder, what are they going to say?" So it's great. I love to see this.
Well, you can find Egberto, everybody, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope. This man is everywhere. Twitter, everywhere.
just like Senator Shealey is as well.
Thank you, Egberto. We'll see you back here next Friday. You can find Egberto every day of the week, politicsdoneright.com.
Thank you, guys. Y'all have a wonderful day. Always love being here. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, David. You started into white people.
Well,
that's your lane, David. It's like, you and I have been talking about racism and race relations for a long time. And, for some people, this is so very uncomfortable. Some white people, this is so very uncomfortable, but they see you and I do this. David and I have been friends for so many years. And what you see here is who we are. Like, I don't know I think so many white people don't have enough Black and brown friends that they don't know how to do what we're doing. And what we're doing, David, it is so natural.
Well, I also think that that there really needs to be some sense of humility, on the part of European Americans to understand how they have been engaged, over the, historically, how they have been, we have been used, and at the same time, I really have a firm belief based on my own experience as a construction worker and a blue collar worker for many years, that there are a lot of people out there who could be reached, on the European Americans who can be reached through their values of working class solidarity. And I've seen it enough times to be convinced that that's the case. But if the folks who are for whatever reasons assuming the leadership and to do that work have already given up, in effect, on European American working people by thinking that they're bought off in some way, then they can't really drill down into the specific circumstances that they're working and come up with a.
So who thinks they're bought off? Like, go back a step. So who thinks they're bought off? Like
white progressives have used that terminology, and that's why I brought up the pamphlet by Ted Allen, "Can White Radicals Be Radicalized?" Mm-hmm. That's online. All you have to do is Google it, and you can read it, online. And what he is he's saying is that those people who are in radical movements have either, those European Americans bring with them a set of assumptions, either that European American working people do not have the same interests as African American and Latinx working people, or that we can ignore the whole issue of race and of inequality and just get people together without, kind of leaving that issue aside. So there's a fine line to be walked. It's kind of a tightrope to get it right, and in order to do that, the mindset that those folks who think of themselves as being progressive have to have, which is to be listening very carefully to what people are saying, to realize that we don't have the answers, that we've failed over and over again to build a mass base, and that the leadership has, in terms of movements, has always been with people of color. It's just that the white folks haven't been listening.
Well, hopefully they'll listen now, David, because Trump was a wake-up call for white America. Black people didn't elect Trump. And I know that, becomes a bigger conversation, but we voted Democrat. We vote with everybody that has a D behind their name to a fault, Yeah. So white people elected Donald Trump. And then now we're at a place in history where, how do we get rid of Donald Trump? You have to give Black people something for that vote. No more will we go to the ballot and vote to save white America when white America is not voting to save us. So we're not giving away that power. We're not giving away our votes for free anymore. It is an exchange, as the movement has said, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore. This is an exchange. You don't just get this vote for free anymore, white America. Black people by 2053 will have a zero net wealth. Zero.
Well,
our house is on fire.
The
racial wealth gap is real.
Yeah. The other side of it is, where does that conversation take place? And
mainstream media is not doing it. That's why we're here, David.
And that's that's one of the things that I'm saying is, where does that conversation have the most impact? And I think it may be that those European American folks who are supporting Sanders and Warren and the left wing of the Democratic Party have really not heard that message themselves.
You know what? I don't. You know what? I don't think they haven't heard it, David. I think they have not. They just haven't recognized it. I think they won't acknowledge it, and they keep trying to push it away, and they don't want to reckon. They don't want to reckon with it. They're pushing it away because they know it. They know they need the progressive movement needs candidates like me.
Well, that's the problem. As I say, with the term woke, is it's not a light switch, and it's going to take a lot of struggle. I mean, a lot of the progressive European American progressive forces that are out there are have really not learned these lessons. That
and Donald Trump should have taught this to them, like the whole all these movements. And I'm saddened that they haven't learned these lessons, David.
Well,
look at who our president is.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making about blaming white working people. As long as there is a default or a tendency to either blame white working people or think that they can be brought in, that's on the one hand, and on the other hand, thinking that they can be brought into a progressive movement without dealing with these issues of inequality, is the failure that we've had, over
and over again, right?
Over and over again, certainly at least 3 generations going back to the New Deal.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas where I'm most concerned that we have a whole mythology around it, including this term that's now being used to fight, the ecological catastrophe that we're facing, namely Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. And that really speaks to a failure to understand how much, for example, the old New Deal from the 1930s actually contributed to the climate crisis today, actually laid the foundations. Now, I've got a 22-page essay on this, and nobody's going to read it right away, but that's part of what we need to deal with, is that a whole set of structures that emerged out of the New Deal, including whites-only suburbs and transportation based on internal combustion engines, and the elimination of farmland, particularly of Black farm owners, all was a result of the New Deal. The way that trade unions have developed in this country, with the failure of trade unions to be able to think in terms of working class politics as opposed to their relationship to a particular corporation.
And that's why this progressive movement, the Bernie Sanders movement, Elizabeth Warren, this is why they have to get on board with having a specific Black agenda.
Yeah.
They tend to think that because their agenda is the agenda is overarching, they tend to think that we're covering Black people when we do this. No, you have to have a specific Black agenda, specific to Black people. You cannot just say, okay, we're going to pull you in. That's why we have the disparities that we have, and the Black people just not falling for that in 2020. And I like to use the word woke. I know you don't, because Black people are woke.
Yeah,
we're not giving away the vote for free. And I'm gonna say that over and over and over again. Hopefully, the progressive movement will understand why my candidacy is so important to all of us as a people. But this is how we close this widening racial wealth gap.
Yeah, and at the same time, keeping in mind that Latinx folks, are part of this mix as well, in that every attack on immigrants, that is made by this administration is a direct threat to the entire Latinx community, because there are so many families in the Chicano and other other communities that that are mixed. In other words, there are people in their own families who are undocumented. So it becomes really important for us to keep those things in mind. The vulnerabilities on income, that you're talking about with ADOS folks in particular, and the vulnerabilities of people having having relatives who are undocumented are really really important to keep in mind.
We are at the top of the hour. I just wanted to be sure to get some of these comments on the screen. I want to thank all of you that have chimed in this morning. We do this every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. David is my trusty co-host. We've been doing this now over a year and a half, David. We have been rocking and rolling every Friday right here on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. So we're trying to get a message out that mainstream media will never get us. We will never have this voice. We will never have, they're trying to write our story, and we're not going to continue to let them do that. So this is why independent media is so important. I am running for the United States Senate right here in Georgia, a very progressive agenda, a Black agenda, an agenda that will change the landscape of this entire country. So I want to thank my trusty co-host, David, for rocking and rolling with me. I love you, David. I thank you for being the white ally and just the support for not just me, but a whole race of people. You put yourself out there in a way that most white people, won't do. And I just want to thank you for speaking truth to power and always standing on the right side of history. So David, I just want to say I thank you tremendously. So you can find me and David again every Friday, 11 a.m. We will be moving to Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. This coming January. We look forward to making sure that we bring you up-to-date information from across the country. I want to shout out my ADOS family nationally, ADOS Atlanta right here. We are moving strong. We got a strong agenda, and we're taking all of this to the United States Senate so we can change the landscape of this country. So please, if you have not donated or signed up to volunteer, my website is tamara4georgia.com. Mr. David.
Thank you, Tamara.
He has 3 or 4 words at the end. Thank you, David. Next Friday, same time, same channel.
Power to the people.
Power to the people.